What's up, guys? Welcome to another Fantasy Fellowship author Q&A session. My name is
Damian.
Damian.
I'm joined by Daniel, and we're fortunate enough to have the lovely Tom Dumbrell with us today, who is the author of the Pillars of Peace series, which is a book series that has taken Bookstagram by storm. Fantastic series, and fortunate enough to have Tom to join us here today.
Yeah, no, it's a real privilege. The Fantasy Fellowship is, I'm not brilliant at navigating, the world of social media and the like, but when I find my corners, when I find my people, and 2 minutes on the Discord with the Fantasy Fellowship group, I realised I'd found my people. That's where all the oddballs are gathered together, I think. So, yeah, it's a real privilege to spend more time in your company.
Right, should we get the ball rolling with the questions then?
Oh, God, yeah, I don't know. Shall we? Earlier on today, I was like, yeah, let's go in blind. Let's just see what happens. Then I'm remembering who submitted these questions.
Nah, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. No one's been too harsh on you. No one's been too harsh.
That's a missed opportunity.
Right, here we go then. First question. Did you know it was going to be a trilogy before starting The Look of the King? Was the whole plot planned in advance? Did it change as the characters took a life of their own? Like, how did it all come about in your head? Like, yeah, tell us your thought process.
Yeah, I'd love to sit here and say that I'm one of those brilliant authors who outlined a full story and is able to contain all of that information in my head. That is absolutely not the case. I'd be lying if I said that. I don't know if this will come up again in any of the other questions, and a lot of people will have already heard this, but I kind of came up with an idea literally woke up March 2020 with the idea for Look of the King and sat with a pen and paper and outlined 18 chapters, which I would say are about 80-90% following what actually ended up in the book. And I would say the only percentage that changed was the ending. And that was through the writing process, I realized as I got into the back end of the book that it was going to tie up way too neatly, too tidily to do the story justice. And I felt that there was going to be some bits that were either going to be, very conveniently brought to a close, or were going to be ended too abruptly. And I started to see already that there was more to the story. And that from there, that's when it went on. And then, of course, you've got this, this whole question about whether, your preference is to lean towards duologies or trilogies. And I just felt that at that point, that's when it became a trilogy. Once I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do everything I wanted to do in the first book.
Yeah, because at least to me anyway, the first two books, Look of the King and No Place for Peace, they do feel like a duology, don't they? Because it's a continuation of Cyrus's story, and then the finale of the trilogy. Obviously it ties it all together nicely, but it's very different change of pace and character-wise, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say I opened myself up to some criticism there in terms of your traditional feel for what a trilogy should be.
Yeah.
Certainly, the first two are definitely partner books. I mean, it would be. I'm going to say this because I love to sell books, but it's almost a shame to read Look of the King and not read No Place for Peace, because I don't think you get the full story arc without reading the two together. And and it still runs to 550, 560 pages. But I didn't want to continue, although I wanted to write a trilogy and I felt there was lots of side characters that I wanted to do stuff with. I didn't want to just bleed the original story arc dry. I wanted to leave some of that, kind of push that to one side and bring some other characters to the spotlight in the third book. And my feeling is that although it's unconventional, people who have read the series like the fact that other characters get center stage in the third book. So it appears to have worked at least as well as I hoped it would anyway. And I had a lot of fun, switching away to new main points of view and being able to explore the world and see it through different eyes.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. Books 1 and 2 very much does feel like, to me anyway, is part 1 and the part 2. With book 3, I love book 3. With book 3 feeling more like a sequel to the part 1 and the part 2 of the first two books. But yeah, no, brilliant.
Yeah, and I think then the challenge was just trying to say, well, while I'm switching away to a new point of view, how can I still find ways to keep that common thread and to keep the characters that people have really enjoyed in books 1 and book 2 still, present and relevant as much as possible, so that you don't feel like you're starting again. And that was, I think, was the challenge with this. I know when my wife was my editor, and when I first spoke to her about it, she was like, however good, bad, or indifferent this book is, you have to ensure that it at least feels relevant to the others. So that was always the challenge with that book. And I think there were some things that I did in book 3 that also were enabled just by increased confidence. Having a female main point of view, I'll be honest with you, needed me to upskill my writing a fair bit and grow my confidence a bit, and to be more open to seeking outside influence as to how to shape that character into one that is a credible female character, which is hopefully again what's come across.
Oh, definitely. And going off what you just said about your writing ability, I definitely feel like over the course of the series, each book gets progressively better and better. Look of the King, very good book, but I think No Place for Peace, excellent. And then you come up to
Where Heroes Were Born.
I think they get increasingly better, and you can see your as a writer as you progress through each book.
Brilliant. You really see your growth as a writer transform in between each book.
It's one of those things I don't know. It's kind of like I fully understand there's 1,000,001 books out there, so it's quite frustrating because you're kind of like, if people are sort of indifferent to the Look of a King, I kind of just, you want to just grab them by the shoulders and say, look, I promise you, if you've taken any enjoyment out of this books, however much you enjoy this, I know you're going to enjoy the next two more, because I just know that they are better books. Having said that, some of the things, some of my limitations with Look of a King helped to shape a book that was ultimately shorter than the others. It was much more to the point. So in some respects, I think that the fact that I didn't try to do too much with The Look of the King makes it a really easy entry point. And I think, generally speaking, you're either going to get what I'm trying to do or not. Like, I'm not trying to rewrite Lord of the Rings or anything like that. Even in the third book, it slows up a bit, but in the most part, every single chapter is meant to really drive the story forward. I don't have too many forays off into side quests and stuff like that. I'm someone who wants to read and feel like every line is relevant to what I'm reading. I know that that's not true of all fantasy readers, and that's where you find your readership. But it was a real, of all the relief that I had across the series, I think getting that feedback that each book had improved. And again, I have to give a huge amount of credit to my wife, because she said, I pushed you harder in book 3. We're on the cusp of divorce at times, because she was just like, this just isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Like, showing me the back of her hand constantly. But I'm glad she did, because as much as it was painful, I think it paid off.
Oh, definitely it did. Like I said, you see your growth throughout the 3 books, and you talk about entry points as well. And one thing that I find with Pillars of Peace, especially Look of the King, is you get your books that are sort of designated entry-level fantasy, like Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn is considered like an entry-level fantasy, and I would put your books up there as well. It's an excellent entry-level fantasy point,
definitely,
for beginners to fantasy, the Pillars of Peace, because it's not too complicated. Everything's quite concise. The fat is neatly trimmed, and the pace is wicked. Brilliant.
No, I'm glad to hear that, and I think there's a lot of, look, I would say that I took huge influence from the likes of Game of Thrones, and I think there's a lot of people now who are through what they're seeing on TV, they're starting to be more interested in what is fantasy, and actually maybe I quite like to explore this genre. And I think I was just trying to do something again that had kind of a familiar, easy feel. Look, I absolutely love the diversity of what I'm seeing in fantasy now. Pulling away from the European medieval setting is absolutely a massive strength to the industry at the moment, to the genre at the moment. But for me, I was like, this is my lane, and this is what I think I can do. And really and truly, I just had a story, and the rest of the setting is primarily sort of secondary to this story I wanted to tell about these characters. And I think as the story went on and the characters became more refined, I think that's where it really started to improve a bit, because I'm no sort of master world builder. But yeah, like you say, hopefully it's an easy one for people to kind of get their teeth into.
Awesome. Totally agree.
Yeah, and it's funny that you actually mentioned Game of Thrones, since the next question features one of the characters, and it's Augustus gives off very similar vibes to Joffrey Baratheon from Song of Ice and Fire. Was Joffrey an inspiration for his character work?
Yeah, certainly. I'd never read the Song of Ice and Fire books until after I'd finished writing, the Pillars of Peace series, and then started realizing just how many similarities there were in there. So I'm just trying to avoid, and I can't imagine George R.R. Martin's coming after me for the £4 that I earned last year for the sale of my book.
Someone is getting sued.
Becomes a massive fantasy series with TV show adaptations, he might come for you.
He might, and he may just come to me to finish off his series at some point. I could do it in 200 pages, quite honestly. I just could, but yeah, I mean, yes, I think Joffrey is masterfully done, and I think the thing that really astounds me is I'm quite heavy-handed with my characters, predominantly because, in Look of the King, I had a fairly short page count to tell people straight away, to a certain extent, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys. So I had to be relatively, I think the grey in the characters comes in more as the books go on. In No Place for Peace, I was able to revisit the characters and show them in slightly different ways. But yeah, definitely, I think Augustus has that kind of that Joffrey entitled, enhanced self-belief feeling, and also that just that insecurity that drives all of that. And I think that's what I tried to get across in that, is that it was born out of not necessarily just being a purely bad person, but just being entirely insecure in a father's shadow, and doing everything you can to assert a dominance or an authority that doesn't really exist. I find that quite fascinating.
No, yeah, brilliant answer.
Yeah.
What was the hardest part of writing The Look of the King or the Pillars of Peace series as a whole, and why was that the hardest part of writing it?
I mean, quite honestly, for me, all of it was hard. The whole writing process was hard. I don't come from any, I've had no writing, input at all. Everything I've learned is literally what, my wife battered into me through this process, very much through a process of trial and error, and then really, really, really great editing on her part. But I think, so all of the writing I found quite challenging. It certainly doesn't come easy to me, but I think, I would combine that with circumstance. So, I had this idea, March 2020, lost my job, had 6 weeks out of work, and was able to get, the majority of Look of the King down, because I needed something to get up each day and work 9 to 5 each day, give me some focus. It was what kept me sane. And I would say that, the books in general kept me sane throughout, because it just gave me something to focus on. And then, as I went back to work and pubs started reopening and other distractions started popping up, I found it more and more difficult actually just to carve out time and the attention that it takes me, that I require to get the words on the page. So by the end, certainly by the end of Where Heroes Were Born, it was very much, I was just dragging myself to finish this story that I knew I wanted to finish, and I knew it deserved to be finished. So I think that was the hardest thing. And I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of writers or aspiring writers, is just trying to carve out the time, the routine to get the words on the page.
Yeah.
And that's the bit I would definitely reflect on, that was the most difficult, and now makes it the most difficult for me to move on into something new, because of course the world is opening back up and there's so many distractions.
There is, yeah. The main thing I got from that though, Tom, is that maybe we should be having this Q&A with your wife instead, because she's
she's way more interesting than I am. She certainly looked better on camera. You probably should. Yeah, she'd have some very interesting insights. She'd have some great stories about some of the absolute dross that I put on the page first time round. Some of my first edits, God forbid they ever see the light of day.
Oh no, yeah, and definitely, hopefully, going off the future, we can get your wife involved in one of these.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, brilliant.
Awesome.
So I think you answered the next question already, so I'm just gonna skip that and go to the next one. If you could pick only one book to read for the rest of time, which one would that be?
Ooh. Now, my allegiance to Joe Abercrombie. Now, you're looking for one book here, so I'm going to give you more than one. My allegiance to Joe Abercrombie says that it would be The Blade itself. My genuine answer, I think, in terms of a book that I just look at all the time and just want to keep picking up, is The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Totally.
I think
Brilliant
in
answer.
terms of what that book aims to do and what it does and how charming it is and what a great story, it is one of those ones where you can just finish and then pick up and start again. I can't fault that book in any way. Not that I would begin to fault Joe Abercrombie either.
No. That's it. I've often said myself that I prefer The Hobbit to Lord of the Rings, purely because it's a nice, fun, whimsical sort of adventure. It's classic fantasy. Lord of the Rings obviously is as well, but The Hobbit, it's a nice, fun little adventure, fun characters, fun little exploits. Yeah, no, great great choice.
I feel these days that I'm able to read the Lord of the Rings more effectively with the benefit of the movie in the back of my mind in terms of a reference point. You know, there are points at it where, and I am a lazy reader, and I do tend to skim at times when I'm finding things quite dense, which is probably evident in the way that I write as well. And often there's times I'm just like, you know, what was that bit in the movie? What was Viggo Mortensen or Orlando Bloom doing at that point? And that's kind of my reference, and then I can kind of get back into the story further along the line. Whereas The Hobbit it's like a dream to read. And when you consider how old that book is, relatively speaking, you know, that some of the language obviously is you know, dated by modern standards, and it still reads so easily. It's a masterpiece for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely is. Well, no surprise that you didn't say any of Robin Hobb's books. We know. Robin.
Yeah. I mean, that's Apprentice. It's a masterpiece.
we won't let Sarah watch this. We won't let Sarah watch this interview.
I think she's just boycotting me fully now. That's fine. She's on the list.
The rest of the questions are just Hob questions now. So.
Can't wait to share my views. Yeah. Look, though, but you know, I absolutely, I don't know if we're going to end up unpacking this anymore, but I can absolutely see as well why. You know, I've only read the first 2 books of I think it's the Farseer trilogy, is it? And I can absolutely see how those would be people's favorite books, because again, beautifully written. There's a real kind of cozy quality to them. It's a real classic fantasy feel, and the exploration of the characters is really, really great. I think it's, for me, although I didn't maybe kind of voice this as succinctly as I should have done, it's just the pacing for me is a bit of a challenge. But I've read 2 of the books, and I've been bullied into reading a 3rd. So, you know, I'm hanging in there.
Yeah. Oh, no, the pacing is a bit off sometimes, but
True.
I adore the characters, I adore the writing style, but yeah, the pacing is slightly off at times, definitely. Right. So, Tom, are you planning on writing any other books?
No.
Tell us more about them.
So, I think, like I said, I was definitely burned out by the end of the trilogy, especially because the books got kind of bigger and bigger. And I know that for a lot of the self-published authors, and of course the traditionally published, you know, a 400-page book as Where Heroes Were Born is not a big book in real terms, but for me it was quite a big undertaking. And I tend to add about 20 to 30% in edits. So even when I think a book's done, I tend to add a lot at the last minute. So that kind of really it's digging deep for me. So I definitely needed a break. When I had always kind of wanted to write a book, and then it became I've always wanted to write a trilogy. So I kind of feel a certain element of completion in that. So I think if I didn't write anything else again, there'd be a lot of very happy people. But no, you know, it would be fine for me. But I would be lying if I didn't say there's like a little niggling, you know, thought in the back of my mind as to wanting to write, and it has become a habit. However difficult it is. And I think coming into the winter months, I think with November being a big month for people trying to get stuck into their writing projects, I have a feeling that it might very well, I might be dragged back in by the momentum of it. As to what I would do, I mean, I've got a few things. I think it was a Joe Abercrombie interview where he sort of said, you know, when he has ideas, sometimes he finds it quite difficult to imagine doing them outside of the first law world, because he's got the world, he's got the characters. So there is a big part of me that has, you know, a number of ideas for novellas, for some of the spin-off character or the secondary characters. I could advance the timeline and do another trilogy. I mean, there's plenty of ideas there. The world's built, and I think there's some characters at the end of book 3 that have got some longevity, have got some lifespan.
Oh, definitely, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Which is you mentioned about novellas, and I could see novellas for characters like Seth or Broderick. But also, if you were to do another like sequel to book 3, because book 3 opened up the world, I thought quite massively. You saw areas to Peacehaven, and there was the planned expedition to, was it the Whitelands? Which is somewhere I could definitely see being explored in the future, possibly with Captain Goldhand and Seth, maybe.
There's I like all of that, and actually I do. Interestingly, it kind of started out as being a very kind of medieval fantasy, and it's funny how much that switched to being more of a sort of seafaring pirate story. And a lot of people's favorite parts, Roscoe as a pirate character is one that I have a lot of fun writing, and I get a lot more license there to just be fun with the, be funny with the storylines and real true dad jokes. I mean, one day I'm going to have a child. I'm sure it's going to give me a really hard time for some of those jokes in there, but I have a lot of fun with them. So yeah, I think there is some scope there. But then, I'm also conscious that, it's the one thing that I've done now. And there's a part of me that also thinks it would be great to see, could I do something different?
Yeah.
Could I do something that is maybe more specifically adult focused? So I've kind of stumbled on the, all ages fantasy term for the Pillars of Peace. Although I do personally feel that book 3 is I think they get a little bit more gritty as they go, and there's a bit more edge to book 3 than book 1. So I think I was gradually finding my feet a bit with that. So I have got, I don't mind saying I've got a full outline, and I've got a certain number of thousand words that I kind of penned as I was doing the edits on Where Heroes Were Born, and I wanted a bit of a distraction of an adult fantasy that would probably be a very similar kind of setup, straight to the point, but just a little bit more edgy. So that's something that I may look to do, but that would be a standalone. I think if I'm going to do something non-Pillars of Peace world, non-quadripartite world, it would probably be a standalone, because I would want to just test the water without feeling like I'm committing to another trilogy. So we'll see. I'm kind of bouncing around a few ideas at the moment, and it's almost quite frustrating. I wish I just had one that I could kind of tunnel vision on. But I'm kind of just moving things along with a couple of different ideas, and we'll see what sparks.
Yeah, I hope you do continue, Tom. Selfishly for my own reasons, because I love your writing. So yeah, I hope you do.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. I was thinking about this today. I think I totally buy the you have to write for yourself policy, and ultimately it's only me that's going to drag me in front of a laptop on a Sunday when I could be. I keep mentioning the pub. It sounds like I've got a problem, but I could be off doing other things.
We will drag you in front of a laptop if you want us to. We can do that as well.
And it's like but I do think that motivating myself to want to do that, a big part of that does come from people saying, actually, we would love to hear what you've got to write. So it's not necessarily that I'm writing it for other people, but knowing that people would be interested in reading it does play a factor. And although I wrote Look of the King for myself, I really loved seeing people read it, and I won't lie, it does give me a buzz when people enjoy the books, and that was one of the main reasons that I didn't just call it a day on book 3 and just say, well, look, I could legitimately just leave Pillars of Peace as a duology, but I knew that there was still a bit more that I wanted to say, and it was only because people thought a third book was coming that I kept going at it. So that kind of stuff does help. So we'll see. Probably I'll just release something in January 23. I'll just force my wife to edit another whole book in December and end up a single man with a new book.
It'll be worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And after releasing a whole trilogy, what do you think does literary success look like to you now?
Genuinely, I won't lie, like a lot of authors, I do check my Goodreads. I'm always keeping an eye on my reviews, and every time I get a good review, it feels like it's been a bit of a success. And every time I get a review that's maybe not so positive, I feel like it was a failure and it was the worst trilogy ever written. But I've met some really brilliant people through these books, made some good connections, made some good friends, and it's an absolute bonus if those people have also enjoyed the books. I really love, people contacting me as they're reading it with their theories and stuff like that. I mean, my answer is always like the zip mouth emoji, because what am I going to do? Like, I can't tell them what's going to happen. So I'm like, oh, tell me where you're up to. No, can't say anything. But I've had a couple of people to whom the books have really, meant. I mean a couple of people to whom the books really came at an important point in their life. And the books really mean something to them, and that alone would have been success for me, for sure. And to anybody who'd already read the books and went out and bought the compiled edition, that's a huge investment of your money, your effort, and that, and that's not to say that it's any lesser of support from someone who's diving into the series for the first time. But if you've already read them and you still want to go out and spend that money, that to me that's success. That really is.
Definitely. And you're seeing that success at the moment as well. You know, I'm seeing you all over Bookstagram at the moment. Like I said at the start of the video, obviously the Broken Binding brought out that gorgeous edition, almost Blizzard edition. Yeah, you're obviously seeing that success. Hopefully that success continues for you for a very long time, Tom.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been really nice because of the fact that, you know, I didn't honestly expect, but of course, Bookstagram in particular and Twitter, it's brilliant because you don't realize sometimes you're speaking to people in every corner of the world. So, and of course, one of the amazing things about partnering with Broken Binding was the distribution and the scale and the scope of distribution that they offer. So, but because of that, you know, we saw this kind of great first wave of books going out to the UK and then out to Europe, and it's kind of just been going and going. I'm starting to think they sold more than 300 of these things, to be honest with you. It's popping up everywhere. You know, I only have signed 300 of them, and it would be possible to replicate my signature. So, you know,
quite a hot talking point, isn't it?
It is
on the Broken Binding Facebook groups, especially. Yeah.
I mean, look, it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, it is my signature. I think
Yeah.
the problem is if you send out your first book. I mean, when I signed my first book, I didn't think somebody was going to ask me to sign a second book. This is back before this, you know, these copies, you know, back when I was signing some of the first copies of Look of the King. So I think probably if I'd known that I would at some point have to sign, although having said that, if I knew I was going to sign 300 copies, I would probably keep my signature as brief as possible.
Yeah.
But maybe I might have made it a bit more creative. But the great news is, I mean, that is my legit signature. So if anyone gets hold of my bank card at any point, you know, have at it. You know, you can treat yourself. But I do just want to, because I don't know whether I'll get another opportunity. You know, I do just want to take a moment to say just how brilliant the Broken Binding business and the people in that business is. You know, I absolutely get that they're a small business and there are some pressures on them and some constraints that mean that, you know, there are some occasional frustrations that pop up. But truly, having worked with them, having been inside that business and seen, you know, the individuals inside that business working until dark at night and from not seeing daylight because they're in the warehouse packaging up books, you know, and busting their backside every day to build partnerships with publishers, and it's still a small business. What they do is absolutely incredible. And, you know, unless anyone's interested in knowing the whole background to mine, I mean, in brief, I just went to them and said, I would love to do this, and they said, yes, do it, and we will help you make it happen, and we will sell it to our audience, and we will provide, you know, the monetary support you need. And they never once said to me, oh, rein it in on the spec. They said, we want to create something beautiful. We want you to be in a position to put out, you know, the definitive versions of your books, and they supported all of that. And I really think sometimes we have to just back up and say, this is the business we wanted a year ago. We've got it now, and let's cherish it and support it, because they really are fantastic. And they probably never see this, but I feel the day I left the day I left signing the books, I wanted to say that to people, because even I didn't get that perspective until I really went and spent time with them.
And no, I agree. We are very, very big fans of the Broken Binding here at the Fantasy Fellowship. Totally agree.
And like you said as well, you said before, we've wanted an adult fantasy sub for a long time, and we finally got that now. They're delivering us back catalogue books of you know, books that we would struggle to get as hardcovers or as special editions now. And yeah, they're receptive to their customers. Yeah, they're fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And this might seem a bit bitchy at the moment, but the people in that Facebook group, you know, need to rein it in sometimes.
I would just say, I know that any of the complaints that I've seen are not responsible, not the responsibility of Broken Binding. They are print level problems. They work with some of the biggest and best printers in the world, but mistakes still happen, and they hold those partners accountable, and they will shift away from working with publishers or printers because they're not getting the right results, because they want to deliver the right results for people. So that's the thing. I almost want to jump on it every time and just say, look, I can assure you, without going into the ins and outs of this, this is not their doing. You know, it's coming from backlogs somewhere else. Someone's let them down. But yeah, look, people are paying good money for their books, so I fully understand that. I want to say this as a kind of prompt to a little bit more patience and caution, because the business will keep going, but it feeds off of our support. It doesn't feed off the monetary support as much as it does just the support of knowing that they're giving books to people that are really happy to see these books. hardback first law. I mean,
Yeah. I know, yeah.
I was like hovering over spending hundreds and hundreds. I've got an edition of the first law series in hardback, but it's like the small versions that they did for a book club. But to get hardback editions better than the originals, just in their first month, come on, it's amazing.
Exactly, that was such a massive selling point as well. Their first month, they bring out the first law trilogy, and they were beautiful editions as well, beautiful stencils.
True, yeah.
I know people complaining at the moment, like, oh, we haven't had stenciled edges since the first law trilogy, but what's the issue? You're still getting beautiful hardback special editions for a good price.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was interested to see what people thought about the edges with mine. I debated stenciled edges and all sorts of things, and I felt that the cover was busy enough. And I sometimes think you can over-design for the sake of over-designing. For me, having pages sewn in, having that really high quality solid black sprayed edge, and some of the other luxury touches, we upgraded the paper, the foiling. Those were more important to me, and I'm really pleased to see that people understood stylistically what I was going for with that book, rather than kind of just having it just like, just so much going on. And I do think sometimes it's like, does it need it? I'm looking at the current subscription books, and I think they look great with the solid edges. But again, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I fully get that, but let's just support them. And look, they everything they do just goes from strength to strength. I mean, I'm really pleased to see how happy people are with my book. But what they've got coming up is just going to go from strength to strength. They're going to do some amazing stuff. I'm sure Ryan Cahill's project's going to be amazing, and I'm sure. And these are indie, like, just take aside for 1 second all the Illumicrates and that of this world. Yeah. These guys are doing all the kind of the high, traditionally published stuff, and then they're also able to extend that out to self-published authors and do these amazing special editions. That's like, it's next level.
It is next level.
It is.
And I'm a real big lover of the subgenre of indie fantasy at the moment. Some of the very best books I've read this year actually have been obviously indie fantasy. Your book,
same.
Ryan Cahill's books, Dragon Mage. Yeah, there's so many fantastic indie books out there at the moment that many people haven't heard of. I wouldn't have heard about your books, Tom, unless it was for Bookstagram.
Yeah.
Fortunately, a few months later, obviously Broken Binding brought out their edition, so touch wood, a lot more people are hearing about it. But yeah, they're that's brilliant that Broken Binding are doing that, because there are so many fantastic indie books out there at the moment, and they deserve their due, because they're just as good, if not better, than a lot of the mainline published books out there at the moment, at least from my perspective, and probably from the perspective of a lot of other people. So it's brilliant to see that. It really, really is nice to see that at the moment.
Even if this is the only trilogy or books that I write, I will have been fortunate enough to be part of this current generation of self-published authors who happen to be doing what we're doing in tandem with Broken Binding, and that is a golden opportunity. I'm not going to say golden generation, but I do think that the self-published authors that we have at the moment are of really, really high standard, and projects like the Kickstarter campaigns and what Broken Binding is doing is making it legit that these self-published authors can continue to be self-published and have a good crack of success at it. So anyway, I don't want to feel like I'm fanboying them, but it's obviously that ties into my edition, and that's my big takeaway, is that it wouldn't have happened without them. So like you say, a lot of people wouldn't know about my books without them, so it's definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that quickly, guys, if you're watching this, check out more indie fantasy books. It's the ones I've mentioned. You've got the Sword of Hygen, you have the Iron Crown. There's some fantastic books. Fangs of War by E.J. Dobell, brilliant book.
E.J. Dobell's like just insane. I mean, he's like, I don't know, he's doing it like between his homework for school or something, and he's just like, he's just ripping out these incredible books. He's going to probably see this and kick my ass. And there's, like, I absolutely adore Zach Argyle's books as well. I love that series. Of course, we can't get through a conversation without talking about Illborn as well, which is another one. And we've just seen Dan drop his new cover reveals. It's a really cool, and it's a really good crowd. A lot of what I did with this book, I spoke to other authors to understand, what they did with their illustrations or who they worked with, and now I've got people coming to me and asking me about how I did mine, who I printed with. It's a very, very good community of people, and a lot of us are reading each other's books as well, which is nice. So there's a really supportive quality to that. But yeah, it's a cool time to be involved in it, I would say.
It definitely is. And just to obviously where we've mentioned your special edition from the Broken Binding, you know, here we are, guys. You know, beautiful edition. You know, beautiful black. Here we go, Tom. Absolutely.
You better believe I've got a copy.
Oh, it's blurred out.
It's blurred out.
Me as well. Perfect. Yeah, genuinely one of the most beautiful books on my shelves, and I've got a lot of special editions on my shelves, and this is creme de la creme. It's absolutely beautiful, and there is actually a sale, you know, for the Broken Binding going on this weekend. I don't know whether this video will be live at that point, but if it is, you know, guys, check it out, because they will be selling leftovers of the Pillars of Peace omnibus, and from my perspective, you're missing out if you don't have it. It's a beautiful, beautiful book.
Yeah, I've had a few people contact me about that, and I don't know how many they've got left. I hope they get them, especially when I'm seeing people who have bought them and thrown them straight on eBay, which is just a real shame. And wonderfully optimistic on their part that they thought they were going to get 300 quid for it. Like, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. But you know, even the compiled edition is just a great story, because you know, you talk about my involvement in Bookstagram. You know, I stumbled across Katrina, who did the artwork. I saw her promoting her own artwork on Instagram, and was just straight away, I was just like, this is unique, this is different, this is going to give a really unique feel to this book, and it's going to be a really collaborative effort where it is not just about my stories, but about her interpretation in the art. And I gave, you know, she had a really good license to go off and do what she does. And I know that now she's absolutely inundated with, you know, other projects, which is brilliant to see. And I met her through Instagram. I met Ant, who did the cartography for me, again through Instagram, and we were able to get together, you know, the day the books came in, and spend a bit of time together. And then my wife. So it's a, you know, small team. And you know, we were working on it from sort of January onwards, you know, having catch-ups and, you know, sharing our progress and stuff. And it's almost a bit sad to bring it to an end, although it's really great to see Katrina's art looking incredible in both in the book and on the cover. And I mean, the foiling, I mean, I was debating what to do with the foiling, and then when I saw it, when you know, came around to looking at that image that she'd done, I was just like, this is just. And I was going to put words and all kinds of stuff on it. I was like this says enough, right? And once you've read the book and you get what it's about, that image, it's just, yeah, I was, you know, and that's not me, that's her, you know, but it's really special. And her ability to take the original book covers and reimagine them inside the book as well, to add a little bit of extra art, they're all just nice. They're just nice features. I would say, well, one point of learning for me, if you haven't read all three of the books, possibly don't go searching through the books for that artwork. I maybe could have reined in a little bit which scenes I chose to depict in the artwork. I would say just start at page 1 and read through. You know, don't go hunting for the artwork too much. I mean, maybe it won't make too much impact on you, but yeah, note to self: try and maybe be a little bit more vague with the art, the scenes you choose to depict in your artwork. Lesson learned.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Yes. The next question is, if you could go back knowing what you know now, is there anything you would change about writing the Look of the King, or even the series as a whole? You know, is there any regrets that you have about characters or story development?
Look, I think I could do a better job of Look of the King now. I mean, I think I could do more with it. There will always be a thought in my mind of whether or not I could have done it from additional points of view as well, maybe 3 or 4 points of view, where I stuck to pretty much well, there's 3 in the first book, but you know, but then 2 generally. But you also have to balance out, there's quite a lot of twists and turns, and unless you just withhold information from the reader, you have to be selective about which point of view you're in, and the more point of views you have, the more difficult it becomes to surprise people, because you've just got too many eyes on what's going on. And that's not to say that I wouldn't change anything, but I was also, because I wrote Look of the King and then was sort of writing No Place for Peace, as my wife was editing the first book, I was able to make sure that any changes I needed to make to Look of the King to enable No Place for Peace was done in real time. So I didn't put myself in a position where I had book one written and I'm regretting some of the decisions I've made, because I was able to adjust them before the book was released. So I'm kind of happy with them. You know, they are what they are. They were what they were at the time. I could definitely write the series better now. But you know, no regrets, and I am proud of them given my limitations. You know, I think we did a decent job.
You did do, yeah. Sorry,
You did a great job.
Great job. You should be proud of it. And you mentioned about the expanded POVs, because obviously in book 3 you get the expanded POVs with several of the background characters, don't you? And you see an extra. It provides extra like character development for those characters, and obviously that would have been cool to see for book 1. But like you said, you know, does it give away too much for those characters in the overall story as well? But yeah, no, that was very nice.
I think, yeah, I think I wanted, one of the things I enjoy most, particularly about multiple point of view, and I think we probably all share this, is seeing the same person from different perspectives. Because converging storylines is great when you get two people come together, especially when you start the book thinking, I know they're going to meet at some point, but I just don't know how this is going to play out. Love that. And you know, and then seeing the same person through multiple perspectives. So I loved having the opportunity in the third book to take those characters, go a bit, you know, off page really, and do something that I probably shouldn't be doing in the third book, and all of a sudden introducing, but they weren't really new points of view because we already knew the characters. It's, you know, they didn't pop up out of the blue. But it also gave me an opportunity to ensure, hopefully as closely as possible, that when people put down the third book, they have a very, very clear view as to where the characters are at, you know, where their story ends or where they're going next, so that there wasn't really any loose ends. And I could only really do that without there being lots of just wild conversations to get that information across. The only way I could really do that was to jump into those heads and say, what are they really thinking? What are they feeling about this 10 years that's passed between book 2 and book 3? You know, what does their outlook look like? Because, you know, however perfect the landscape seems to be, there's always stuff rumbling in people's minds.
No, that was definitely a very nice touch in book 3. You see these characters in the earlier books, you experience them, but you don't know very much about them.
There was one character I think I told you specifically over Instagram that I was happy to get their one point of view chapter over book 3, because it provided a lot more depth to that character, to learn more about them. And that character for me, he shot up from he's a fun character to, you know, this is a, you know, a really cool layered character. You know, it'd be nice to know actually know more about him. So yeah, that's another that I could see possibly happening as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to do, like, I know there's lots of kind of wild things that happen and there's lots of twists and turns. One of the things I really, you know, wanted to try and show is how just really minor things can happen, and they can really sit in people's minds, and they can really change the outcomes for people. And sometimes people can fester on something that happened a long time ago, or they can feel regret about things, and they don't always have to be massive plot points, but they're just little things that happen in people's past that can change the whole way that they, you know, whether it's someone's expectations upon them or whether they feel slighted by something. I did want it to be fairly, you know, as much as possible, as real as it could be. And then, you know, it's really great when people, you know, do relate to the characters. And I have Wendell in book 2 in particular, who is a really kind of divisive character, because people really don't know how to judge how he feels about his situation. And depending on your own experiences, I think that was, in terms of creating a bit of grey around the character, that was the most fun that I had, and is the character that I always get the most mixed reaction to. I find that really fun to hear as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, because you mentioned to me before about how Wendell in book 2 was your attempt at sort of like an Abercrombie self-deprecating point of view, and I totally got that. It was spot on in that regard.
It was a very natural voice for me, I have to say. It's like, I love it when people say this character's awful. I was like, that's a piece of me you're talking about right there. People really don't like. But no, Wendell, I think when you have, I mean, Cyrus, I don't think it's any kind of you know, major spoiler to say that Cyrus, within, you know, Look of the King, establishes himself as being, you know, the guy you want to root for, in particular, because, you know, he is a guy who is an underdog. You know, he is that classic fantasy character on his kind of hero journey of sorts. But with that comes the fact that you generally have a feel for they're going to do the right thing. And it's really interesting writing the story from a character whose first thought may or may not be, what's the right thing, but is more about what's the right thing for me. And when you have that complexity, we have to sit for a second and go, okay, I've just written a piece of dialogue. What do I think this character's response would be, rather than a very instinctive, well, Cyrus or the other good guys, in the story are going to say this. And from that perspective, having those slightly more complicated characters were a lot of fun, because you really have to rework that dialogue to get across the nuance of the character and their own self-interest. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, that was the closest I think I came to trying to, because I started off trying to replicate Joe Abercrombie in the first draft of Look of the King, and I tell you, it was a mess. Yeah, basically don't take a pioneer in a genre and try and recreate that in your debut, is what I learned.
Yes, so guys, if you've only read Look of the King and you're on the fence, please do continue with No Place for Peace. Another example, great character work from a very nuanced character who does appear very sort of black and white in the first book, who does become a lot more ambiguous in book 2. So yeah, please do, guys. It's great development.
Loving that sales plug. You beat me to it.
Who was your favorite character to write, and conversely, who is your favorite character from a reading perspective?
Yeah, I think probably Wendell's going to be the one that I had most fun writing, and I found most rewarding to read. Having said that, probably I think my most successful character, I really did enjoy, once I got over the fear of it, writing Fran as a point of view. Getting involved in writing a female point of view was obviously daunting, and I definitely didn't get it right on the first go round. But as we honed it, and as we came away from just having to have a female character who's just a badass beating everybody up, and because that's what makes a strong female character, to finding where that character ended up, and realizing actually some of the foreshadowing that we'd been able to do in the groundwork in books 1 and books 2. For that character, and there was lots of people who were really interested to see what Fran would become, and so it was kind of like a point of responsibility really to see that through, because she was kind of sidelined a little bit, but there was always promise in that character, I think. So yeah, that was probably the one I come away I'm just most proud of.
Yeah, that's a good example. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on Locke, actually, because we spoke briefly about Locke from book 3, and for me anyway, I loved Locke. Over the course of the trilogy, I would probably say Locke is my favorite character. And you said to me before that Locke doesn't seem to get much recognition in the reviews, and that's a shame too, because I thought Locke was brilliant. Like I said, my favorite character over the series.
Yeah, I think, look, there's a little bit of an imbalance in the third story. There is a bit more of a lean towards Fran's perspective, which I think naturally maybe just, and there's been a bit more exposure to Fran. Locke, really does come up quite towards the back of book 2, and then obviously becomes really central in book 3. I really, really enjoyed writing that character as a different take on, and again, I felt he was just a different character, and his situation. Yeah. I really love when you've just got two people together, whether they get on or not, with just that bit of banter going. I think that's what people love particularly about kind of Cyrus and Garrett in book 1, and I think the Locke in his role as prison master in book 3, and his interactions with his inmates are some of the most fun stuff to write as well, because although he doesn't always get the best of it, it's it was a good thing to write. And I exploring self-doubt, we all have it. So to explore a character, as Cyrus has to a certain extent as well, with deep self-doubt, I think is interesting to me, because again, it means that there's a certain unpredictability in people's actions.
Yeah, there's I won't go too deep into it because spoiler territory. I've expressed it to you before. There's that one part of with Locke towards the end of book 4, which I thought was brilliant, absolutely very cathartic, and it was just a brilliant capstone for that character, I thought.
Yeah, the wraparound, coming back to end the book, I was, I think I'm someone who likes to outline quite a lot and feel quite confident about where the book is going to go, but gaining that confidence as time went on to just kind of go, look, I know this is book 3. It needs to end, and it needs to end as strongly as possible. But I don't know how that's going to look just yet. I'm going to let the characters take the reins a little bit. And when it came round to the end, again, you know, I felt very happy with the way it tied off, and that everybody got the ending that they deserved in a roundabout way. So, which is part of the reason, another reason that drives me away from necessarily doing anything more in this world, because I do think things can kind of overstay their welcome a little bit, and I do feel like it was a very natural end point, the book where it is, and the epilogue of the last book, I think, is, you know, well, speaking to Dan Jackson of Illborn fame, and he said he felt that the last 100 pages were the best 100 pages of the series, and so that seems like a great place to stop, right?
Yeah. Brilliant. Right. Despite being a fantasy series, the series reads a lot like historical fiction. I know you've mentioned before that it's sort of similar to King Arthur, The Look of a King. There are some hints of magic in the world implied by the mirror that Cyrus gives to Francine.
Yeah.
Had you ever planned to like implement magic in like a more prominent or prevalent role within the series, or was it always supposed to be sort of like a background implied aspect of the story?
Yeah, so I'm not somebody who's hugely sort of turned on by magic, and I think there's some really great magic systems in some of the books I've read, and mythical beasts and creatures and all that stuff, and I know that's really important to a lot of fantasy readers. It didn't have a place in The Look of the King, and given the streamlined nature of that book, it was only ever going to complicate the story from really what I wanted to do, which is to just drive from point A to point B, which, again, I know doesn't work for everybody, and I'm entirely aware of that, so I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It then just felt a little bit thereafter that if I introduced magic, it would seem like a bit of a cop-out, like to resolve, if I introduce magic in any heavy-handed way. Now, there is part of me that thinks, you know, the quadripartite, the world that we're in, you know, with the shoulder sort of regions of the Cantu Isles and the White Lands, there's no, we as far as we know, there's no sort of huge presence of magic there, but there's more world out there and beyond that as far as I see it. So there's possibility, you know, there is part of me that thinks if I did do a follow-up series, maybe there could be, you know, and maybe all of a sudden, you know, the people that remain within the world that we know are going to have to come up against forces that they're not familiar with. But I don't know, it just never felt like, I just felt like it was going to be adding it for the sake of ticking a box. It was never central to the story. It was never going to adjust the plight of the characters. So but I get it, and I'm always sorry when people start the series and they keep expecting magic to pop up, and if they're disappointed by the fact there isn't, you know, I'm always happy to broadcast that as much as possible. You're not going to get that. And when I look at Abercrombie's work, you know, Scott Lynch, who I really enjoy, even you know, Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, a lot of that really, they're just human interactions. I know there are dragons. Don't get me wrong. I'm not naive to all the stuff that's going on in George R. R. Martin's world, and but most of the magic in that is not stuff, they're not the plot lines I really enjoy. I just love situations that you can relate to, because they are confined within human restrictions and human capability. I find that more interesting for me. And I found, you know, over the last year reading, you know, a lot of fantasy that it isn't really connecting with me necessarily as much as I used to think it was. And I am leaning towards trying to explore more historical fiction, because I've learned in my writing that that's where my interests lie. Yeah,
definitely. It does cross very similar to historical fiction. Obviously, the world in The Look of the King is obviously a made up world, but it does have those strong historical fiction vibes. And yeah, like the central human drama and the interpersonal drama is the high point of the Pillars of Peace series, and yeah, can't disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I would have, you know, I absolutely like a huge admiration for some of the writers who are putting, you know, fantasy into truly historical, well-researched settings. I've read some really good ones. I mean, look at the Children of God and Fighting Men. Is it the Shona Lawless book? The amount of research and stuff in that is admirable. Yeah. I just felt that there wasn't a time in history that would allow me to do all the things that I wanted to do in my story, and I wanted to create my own borders. I wanted to create my own landscape that I could do whatever the story needed to do, you know, without being confined.
Yeah, going off that quickly, it's not a question that we have written, but it's just maybe because the world in Pillars of Peace, it's like an amalgamation of different locations, isn't it? You have Peacehaven, which is very sort of medieval England, and it seems like you've got places that are inspired by Renaissance Italy, the Caribbean. Yeah, like, was that always your aim, to have these different sort of climates and cultures like coalesce together?
Yeah, I wanted to create some distinction. I wanted to create some diversity in the world, and the easiest way to do that is to hang your hat on subtle hints towards places that we all know when we look at a world map, so that you've got that familiarity. And again, it helps you to more concisely get across the feel of the landscape with a couple of words that you would say, oh, I know what kind of landscape that is. So yeah, I didn't want to spend too much time there pretending I'd created some incredible world. I mean, it's generally a sort of medieval setting. You know, it's either going to be castles or palaces and you know, but yes, exploring the world more and being able to do that gradually as the series went on, and making the world more diverse and getting out into, you know, a bit more diversity in terms of the cultures was really exciting. And that is where, you know, those white lands, you know, that are unexplored, it does still hold some interest to me, because I know how that would look and feel.
Yeah, and that was something that was always in the back of my mind whilst reading it, that you heard about these places like the White Lands, but you don't know what's actually there. So I think that would be very cool to explore that.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And look, world building is not my huge strength, but I was pleased to be able to do that cumulatively as the books went on. Rather, you know, I know some people love to have the whole world thrown at them, and again, it's frustrating sometimes, because I know that people have to read through the 3 books to get a feel for the extent of what I have in mind. But I think it just works. It worked better for me to just add information as we went, not to withhold it. It's there, but to grow the vision, so that we're really focusing, you know, on the key points of the story. And letting the world grow as the story grows.
Cool. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've been very kind.
No, we're big fans of the book, Tom. It's and we've got a lot of big fans of the book on the Discord community as well. It's well deserved praise, I think. You know, it's a really good book series. It's fantastic. You get better and better with each book. You deserve the praise. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, and I appreciate all the support. I know that there's so many people buy into reading it. You know, so many people who ordered the boxes that I sent out with the books, and just that support is massive. People taking a chance on the whole series and going at it in one go is really great. That's a huge show of faith. You know, so I hope people have been enjoying it, and they'll just have fun. That again, you know, I don't necessarily expect it's going to be everybody's favorite book, but as long as they sit down and have fun within the pages, have a bit of a laugh, you know, maybe get affected by some of the characters, that's all I'm aiming for, really. So let's hope that's what people are getting.
Yeah, you've achieved that. I can safely say that, going off conversations on the Discord, you achieved that, definitely.
Perfect. Never hurts to hear that, Damian. Appreciate that very much. Feel free to just DM me with that kind of feedback anytime. Those DMs are always open to you, my friends.
Will do.
Right on in. Awesome.
Speaking of, I think we have only one question left, because the others you answered while answering other questions. And it's a community question. Tom, how do you manage to be so talented at such a visual spectacle at the same time?
It's a great question. Credit to whoever it was that submitted that question. Where do I start? Good genes, hard work, great skincare regime. I don't know. I mean, it's all those things. Wow, it's an honor to hear that. And you know, I can't imagine who thought up a question like that, but they're clearly a very bright individual.
Yeah, they are.
They are, definitely. Spot on.
I really thought I was going to need one positive question, right? So don't hold that one against me.
You are a visual spectacle, Tom. 100%.
Oh.
Definitely, yeah.
Oh.
It's definitely a very accurate question.
I mean, I was going to wear a tuxedo, genuinely, but it's so muddy here today. Like, I actually had my tux out, and I was going to wear it, and it was coupled with just a pair of Adidas sport shorts. I had this great little skit I was going to do about how I was here in smart casual, but it is roasting in this room. I was just like, screw it, I just can't. They're just going to have to put up with all of this, just with a bit of creative lighting. But no, this is honestly so much fun to do, and it is very, very self-indulging because it's just talking about my books for an hour. But genuinely, again, like all the joking aside, I have such fun with the Fantasy Fellowship. You guys are doing some incredible things, speaking to some incredible authors. So to even be in the mix of that is hugely, hugely appreciated. And I only sell books because, you know, people are supportive and they give it a go and they buy into what I've tried to do. So you know, that is not, you know, underestimated by me. So thanks for your time as well. I mean, it's, you know, 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening. Imagine where you could be.
Exactly. All the possibilities of where we could be.
Yeah.
Tom, we're more than happy to have had you here. You're a lovely guy, absolute legend. You're fantastic on the Discord. Everyone thinks you're hilarious, and you deserve all the success in the world because your books they're a great series that go from strength to strength, and you've been fantastic tonight, and it's been an absolute pleasure to pick your brains and to chat with you. Honestly, we're very, very fortunate to have.
I thought I was going to need a lot more of this beer than I've had, to be honest with you. I'm not doing this sober, but as it goes, it was pretty good. So,
no, great fun. It's been really, really good, and very.
I just look forward to the roast now when you get everybody together to talk about the books. That's the next video that's coming up, isn't it? Can't wait for that.
Now, why didn't you ask this question? Why didn't you ask this question?
Yeah.
Why is this?
Like I say, they know how to get hold of me, these people, right? So yeah, perfect. It's all good fun. But yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and look forward to continuing the conversation on the Discord, I guess.
100%, definitely, Tom. Thank you once again.
Awesome.
Thank you everyone for listening. You're more than welcome to join our community Discord. You can find our community Discord link in the comments below, or you can find it on our Instagram, which is at fantasy_fellowship. Or you can also find us on Twitter at fanfellowship. And we also have a website at www.fantasy-fellowship.co.uk. If you enjoyed this author Q&A, be sure to hit like, comment on the video, tell us what you enjoyed about the interview, and obviously subscribe to the channel because we've got a lot of exciting content coming up. So obviously, please feel free to come get involved. It's a fantastic community with a lot of exciting things to come, with great Q&As like this with Tom.
Awesome.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks so much, all.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.